Hello from Oslo. Bilateral energy cooperation is necessary for Norway and Germany to achieve our climate goals. The official inauguration of Nordlink marks a milestone for the interconnection of electricity markets, but also the development of offshore wind production and the hydrogen value chain will be crucial. So, Petter, what are your thoughts on how Norway and Germany can strengthen their energy cooperation going forward?
Thank you for that question, Alfred, and hello from Berlin. I see three areas we should focus upon. First, we should capitalize on our successful bilateral cooperation. 40 years between Norway and Germany of building trust and gaining experience in the energy sector. Second, we need our governments, our business communities, and our scientific communities to come together to bring out the best solutions. And third, we should have in place a new framework for new energy carriers, such as hydrogen. So let's focus upon this in the discussions in the Norwegian-German Energy Dialogue 2021.
Good morning and hello to everybody from Oslo. Dear ministers, dear Mr. State Secretary, dear ambassadors, dear distinguished guests. Welcome to the German-Norwegian Energy Dialogue 2021 on the way forward to German-Norwegian energy cooperation. We just heard the introduction from both ambassadors. Thank you very much for that. My name is Michael Kahn, and together with my colleague at the German-Norwegian Chamber of Commerce, Hanne-Marit Grønning-Strand, we will guide you through the next 90 minutes. The energy sector is highly relevant for the bilateral economic relations, and so it is for the Chamber's work, and it has been for the last 30 years, the Chamber's existence. The Energy Dialogue 2021 is planned in cooperation with the German Embassy in Oslo, the Norwegian Embassy in Berlin, with Innovation Norway, both in Germany and in Norway. The event is further supported by our partners, Equinor, RWE Renewables, Statnett, Tennet, Statkraft, DNV, Agder Energy, and Hydro. Today's webinar will discuss how German-Norwegian cooperation can contribute to the Green Deal and to reach the climate goals set in the Paris Agreement, focusing primarily on how to ramp up renewable and low-carbon energy production, and, for example, also how to establish an infrastructure for hydrogen. But before that, I would pass the word to my colleague Hanne-Marit, who will give you some practical information and introduce our speakers. Hanne-Marit?
Thank you so much, Michael. Some practical information before we begin. This webinar is recorded, and you will receive the link for the recording as well as the slides for the presentations afterwards. We have received some questions from the audience in advance, but you may also post your questions in the chat function during the webinar. Let me now introduce you to the program and the speakers of today's webinar. We have gathered a panel of top politicians and industry leaders from both Norway and Germany. In the political panel, we will meet Minister for Energy and Petroleum from Norway, Tina Bru. We will have State Secretary Andreas Feicht from the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Energy in Germany, as well as Olaf, who is Minister for Energy and Environment from Lower Saxony in Germany. The three of them will join us for a political dialogue also after their presentations. In a panel discussion in the end of the webinar, we will meet Arvid, who is Executive Vice President for Hydro Energy Business Area, as well as Anja Isabel Dotzenrath, who is CEO at RWE Renewables. She is also the new Honorary Consul of Norway in Essen. We now go to our keynote presentation of today. which will be presented by Remi Eriksen. He is Group President and CEO at DNV, and he will present an outlook for the energy transition and give some words on the most important pillars of the German Norwegian energy cooperation. Remi Eriksen, welcome.
It is a privilege to be invited to talk about the energy transition and what it implies for the energy relationship between Germany and Norway. For more than 40 years, Norway and Germany have been connected by over 400 kilometers of subsea gas pipelines, starting with Norpipe from Ekofisk to Emden in 1977. And Norway is unquestionably a major energy supplier to Germany. The role will continue and will become rapidly cleaner and greener. Before diving into the specifics of our energy trade, it might help to frame things in terms of the wider energy transition globally and in Europe. This is the 5th year that DNV has issued our energy transition outlook, a forecast to 2050. Broadly, our findings are that in the space of just a single generation, we will see dramatic shifts in energy supply and demand. By the middle of this century, the energy mix will be split in equal shares between fossil and non-fossil sources. And there will be a doubling of electrification and enormous efficiency gains. And I will get back to that later. But even so, decarbonization is not happening fast enough to reach the goals of the Paris Agreement. The enormous scale of the decarbonization required was made apparent by the effects of the pandemic last year on energy demand and therefore also on emissions, which fell by 7% last year. To reach carbon neutrality by 2050, in line with the Paris Agreement, the world will need to make the same level of emission reductions every year through to 2050. That means every year the next 30 years. Clearly, that is not sustainable. The emission reductions last year came at an enormous cost in lives and livelihoods, and we can't empty the airliners twice. So how do we get further emission cuts in the future? Well, we can make a start by using less energy. And this is, in fact, what is going to happen on a worldwide scale. Our forecast is that global energy demand actually peaks in the mid-2030s. That is because energy efficiency gains outpace both population growth and economic growth. And efficiency gains are largely related to steady electrification, as I mentioned earlier. The net effect is that the 9.4 billion people in 2050 will be using almost exactly as much energy as the 7.8 billion of us use today. I can illustrate this by showing you what happens in one category of demand, transport, shown in gray color, hopefully on your screen now on this chart. Their demand is flat, and in fact declines a little bit compared with today, but how is it possible, you may ask, that a road vehicle fleet increasing by 66% will use less energy? The answer is electrification. By 2041, passenger EVs will outnumber internal combustion cars on the road, and EVs are 3 times, as you know, more efficient than fossil fuel cars. There are remarkably efficiency gains also in manufacturing and in the heating, lighting, and cooling of buildings. So a key point is that we will be doing a lot more with a lot less energy in the future. We will get twice the economic output in 2050 compared with today for the same amount of energy. So if using less energy is step 1 to carbon neutrality, then decarbonizing energy supply is step 2. And this chart shows how electricity will grow, in fact, more than double from today's levels over the next 30 years. But the key is that electricity not only doubles, but that by 2050, more than 80% of that electricity will be produced by renewable sources, mainly wind and solar PV. The consequence is not only a strong decarbonization of our energy system, but also the avoidance of the enormous losses to heat that occur in fossil-fired electricity generation. Our forecast shows that gas will surpass oil as the largest single source of primary energy in 2026, and it will continue to grow until gas use peaks in the mid-2030s. After that, it tapers off in the years towards the middle of the century, but still being at a higher level than it is today. Gas has staying power because it not only plays an important role as a dispatchable form of electricity generation, but it is the go-to fuel for demand sectors that are hard to abate. By this, we mean activities that are hard to decarbonize, like high heat processes in iron and steel making, in manufacturing, and in shipping. One way of tackling these hard-to-abate sectors is to decarbonize the natural gas itself. And with that challenge in mind, I'm going to move on to the energy transition in Europe. As you know, Europe is pushing to lead in climate action policy and outcomes towards 2050 based on its strategic vision, a clean planet for all. I'll race through a few slides, though, to show that our forecast says about this greener future. Energy demand peaked in Europe 15 years ago and is on a steady slope downwards. We will see a near doubling of electricity generation in the next 30 years, and by 2050, well over 90% of electricity will be from renewable sources, dominated by wind and solar PV. Road transport will electrify almost entirely in Europe by 2050. Coal and oil use will fall off a cliff, as the saying goes, but gas use will reduce much more gently. The staying power of gas in Europe's hard-to-abate sectors, heating, manufacturing, and heavy transport, is the reason why there is serious debate at the moment on how to decarbonize our gas reliance in Europe. Most gas decarbonization roads lead to hydrogen in some way. And the problem there is that green hydrogen is currently both expensive and scarce. And blue hydrogen from steam methane reforming, where CO2 is captured, is battling to win public acceptance, most notably in Germany. Because of this conundrum, I can leak that in our forthcoming forecast, to be released in September, we are revising up our numbers on biogas. And there are indications that biomethane may take 5% of the methane consumption by 2050. Our view, very firmly at DNV, is that the hydrogen economy cannot wait for the scaling of green hydrogen produced by renewable electricity. On the other hand, blue hydrogen really has to demonstrate beyond doubt that CO2 as a byproduct is comprehensively captured, safely transported, and permanently stored, or even better, used in a product. This is critical issue for Germany, where there will be high demand for natural gas with the shutdown on nuclear power next year and coal by 2038 at the latest. Gas will be needed as a power source, supplementing renewable for the next 2 decades. And for manufacturing in Germany, notably steel, there will be a continued need for decarbonized gas instead of decarbonized electricity. So there is potentially a huge market for green hydrogen imports or import of renewable electricity to produce the green hydrogen in Germany. As some of you may know, there are plans for Germany to hold an international auction for the delivery of green hydrogen. Which brings me to natural gas supply from Norway, which will continue to be important. But with increasing attention paid to the decarbonization of the gas itself, and that is why Project Longship on carbon capture and storage, by far Norway's largest climate-linked investment, is of critical importance. While the initial capture and storage numbers look modest, there is enough storage capacity for 80 billion tons of CO2 in the reservoirs under the seabed of the Norwegian continental shelf. And that is the same, or it equates to 1,000 years of Norway's emissions at current levels. 1,000 years at current levels. So obviously Norway's subsea reservoirs can also take a lot of Europe's captured CO2, including, of course, also Germany's. CCS is not a wild idea from DNV. The IPCC and almost every other forecast for a 1.5-degree warming future includes a large amount of CCS. There is acceptance of this in Europe, with its ambition to create a break-even environment for CCS by 2030. However, the jewel in Norway's crown when it comes to the energy transition remains hydropower. Our reservoirs have the potential to act as a battery for power systems in Europe. And that system is increasingly relying on variable renewable power. That is what makes the opening at the end of March this year of the NordLink subsea cable such a key milestone in our transition journey. NordLink and other interconnectors to come will carry both hydropower and renewable power from the abundant offshore wind resources of Norway's coast. Our assessment show that good large-scale locations for new hydropower, solar and fixed offshore wind are limited in Norway. And that within the next 10 to 15 years, new capacity will come from floating offshore wind, located in deeper waters of our coast. Some of you may know that Equinor's Hywind Tampen floating wind farm supply renewable power to 2 platforms in the Norwegian Sea and is due to come on stream next year at a cost of some 500 million euros. Our projections show that by the mid-2030s, Norway will be adding the equivalent of several Hywind Tampens every year. There is tremendous future for offshore floating wind in Norway, not only because we have the coastline and the wind resources, but mainly because we have the offshore expertise required and, of course, a ready market in continental Europe. Hydropower can also be used to make batteries. There is no doubt that Norway will become a gigafactory destination for the production of batteries to power the electrification of transport, with Germany clearly the largest continental market. Our industrial heavyweights in Norway, Equinor and Hydro, signed an accord with Panasonic in November to explore the forming of a partnership to explore building a green battery business in Norway. Other companies aren't waiting. Morrow Batteries is building a gigafactory near Arendal in southern Norway, with the production due to begin in about 3 years' time. Morrow CEO Terje Andersen has labeled southern Norway as the battery coast and has called it a Kinder egg with abundant, low-cost renewable power, the necessary raw materials, and a location close to European markets. And then there are fuel cells. The Norwegian company TECO 2030, part of the TECO Maritime Group, is planning Norway's first gigafactory for fuel cells for use in ships. The plant will be located in Narvik in northern Norway, hence challenging southern Norway for the title of the battery coast. But work begins this year with first production already in 2022, ramping up to 1.2 gigawatts per year. TECO is partner in the project Green Hydrogen at Blue Danube, along with players such as Siemens, Bosch, AVL, and Verbund. This project involves generating hydrogen from solar and wind power produced in Romania and transported on barges along the Danube to industrial buyers in Austria and Germany. A nice touch is that TECO 2030 will supply fuel cells for the hydrogen-powered tugboats, pushing the barges along the river. Let me close this presentation with the news that Norway's first fuel cells ferry, the 80-car capacity MF Hydra, launched in November last year, will be running on green hydrogen produced by Linde at its Laune petrochemical facility in Germany. Energy supply is just not a one-way street from Norway to Germany. Finally, a note of caution. Our forecast shows that as things stands, we are not on track to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. The world will need much more renewable, will need much more efficiency, and much more CO2 capture and storage. Succeeding with Paris means that the themes I've covered here today will have to intensify dramatically, as will the historic energy relationship between Norway and Germany. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eriksen, for this impressive overview. We now start with the first political keynote from Andreas Feicht. As we heard, State Secretary at the German Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy. Mr. Feicht will give us some insight on how Germany aims to fulfill its 2045 net zero target and how Norway eventually, as Remi Eriksen already mentioned a little bit, can be a partner in this. Mr. Feicht, stage is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. Everything
is fine. Perfect.
Thank you. Well, dear Minister Bry, dear Minister, my dear friend Olaf Lies, dear Mr. Eriksen, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for a warm welcome, and thank you, Mr. Kern and Ms. Brunning-Strand, for organizing the German Norwegian Energy Dialogue. I'm very happy to participate in the opening webinar. The German Norwegian Energy Dialogue is a very important and well-established forum of exchange between our two countries. The topics we will cover in the upcoming webinar series: hydrogen, offshore renewables, electricity market integration, are of utmost importance to the German Norwegian Energy Cooperation. This morning, Minister Olaf Lies and me have already had a very inspiring and fruitful exchange on these topics with the ambassador of Norway to Germany and also the German ambassador to Norway. I'm very happy that NordLink, the first interconnector between our two countries, will be officially opened on the 27th of May. NordLink is a truly German-Norwegian project and a flagship example of successful cross-border network expansion. With NordLink, our two countries will expand the successful and long-standing cooperation from the gas and oil sector to the power sector. By facilitating the integration of renewables, NordLink will contribute to the energy transition and thus to the reaching of our climate targets. Germany has made huge progress in the energy transition. Germany is the only country that combines the coal phase-out with the nuclear phase-out. In the last 10 years, we closed nearly all nuclear power plants. Still, we have managed to cut CO2 emissions in the power sector by more than a half since the year 1990. This means that we over-delivered on our 2020 reduction target in the energy sector by more than 10 percentage points, reaching a 53% reduction instead of 40% reduction. The future development in Germany's energy sector will be determined by the increase in the EU 2030 climate target and the reform of Germany's Climate Change Act as proposed by the German government last week. The new Climate Change Act will increase the German 2030 emission reduction target from 55% to 65%, and it will set an 88% target for 2040. Moreover, we commit to reach greenhouse gas neutrality by 2045. With these new targets, we are the first EU member state to define our national contribution to the new 2030 EU target. The new Climate Change Act stipulates deeper reduction paths for individual sectors until 2030. The maximally permissible emissions in the energy sector in 2030 shall be reduced by around a third. This implies the need for additional expansion of renewables and further exploitation of efficiency potentials. Over the next weeks, we will work out the details of an investment package of up to 8 billion euros for additional measures from 2022 that will help achieve the new targets. Among others, the investment package will focus on the ramp-up of hydrogen and the hydrogen economy. Hydrogen will play an important role to reach our climate goals in areas where direct electrification and energy efficiency will not be sufficient, such as industry and transport. There's also a huge economic potential around hydrogen technologies. From a German perspective, in the long run, renewable hydrogen is the only sustainable option. But in an integrated European hydrogen market, we will also see other options like blue hydrogen. As published in our National Hydrogen Strategy of June 2020, we will plan to set up 5 gigawatts of electrolysis capacity in Germany until 2030, and another 5 gigawatts until 2035. But given the limited potential for renewable energy in Germany, we will remain dependent on hydrogen imports. We will always rely on energy imports in Germany. Norway will be a key partner, both as an exporter of hydrogen and as a technology leader in the hydrogen value chain. This is why closely collaborate in the important project of common European interest, IPCEI, on hydrogen. Both Germany and Norway signed the IPCEI manifesto last December and are preparing a pan-European matchmaking process. I'm confident that we will see German and Norwegian firms cooperating in this key market. The bulk of the renewable energy generation capacity in Germany in 2030 and beyond will be delivered by wind onshore and solar. Offshore wind will make an increasing contribution. We plan to install 20 gigawatts of capacity until 2030 and 40 gigawatts until 2040 in German waters. We hope to install more afterwards if maritime spatial planning for the North and Baltic Sea basins will allow. In addition to offshore wind electricity generation, we also see potential in offshore renewable hydrogen production. I'm aware that the feasibility of producing renewable hydrogen offshore still remains to be demonstrated. To do so, we have designated 2 areas where pilot projects can be realized in the next few years, one in the North Sea and one in the Baltic Sea. Moreover, reaching the ambitious energy and climate objectives up to 2050 will also require coordinated efforts across European countries. Germany and Norway are close partners in the North Sea Energy Cooperation, and we appreciate the excellent exchange within this framework. Since joint offshore projects will be of key importance, we are in general open for the realization of concrete joint and hybrid wind offshore projects. The German government highly rates the energy cooperation with Norway. Norway and Germany are strong partners. As State Secretary, I will continue to build bridges between our governments and economies to further deepen our cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, State Secretary Andreas Feicht. Let us now welcome Tina Bru, Norwegian Minister for Energy and Petroleum. And the Ministry will, on June 11, publish their white paper on long-term value creation from Norwegian energy resources, including also a roadmap for hydrogen. I guess you cannot give us too many details on this today, but we look forward to hear your comments on the existing strategies. Tina Bru, we are ready when you are.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for the invitation to join in this panel. It's very interesting, and I have enjoyed listening to the political statements so far. So, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I would also just like to say that I am very happy that Anja Isabel Dotzenrath had just become Norway's honorary consul in North Rhine-Westphalia, and that she's joining us today. So it's a pleasure to see all of you here. And I would just like to start by saying that in a time where, of course, the pandemic is consuming most of our attention, it's really important that we do not lose sight of the most fundamental long-term challenge that we face, which is, of course, climate change and global warming. At the same time, we have to secure enough energy for a globally growing population, and navigating this challenge is at the core of the energy transition that we're all facing. And changing the huge and complicated global energy system will not just be smooth sailing. I think we can all agree. This is a global challenge, and it must be solved across borders and national legislations and through, of course, international cooperation. And Germany, of course, is one of Norway's most valued partners. We are partners in reaching our common ambitions on climate, but we are also connected by energy. And next week, as Mr. Feicht was mentioning, Prime Minister Erna Solberg will attend the official opening of the NordLink cable, which will increase the exchange capacity and the effective use of our joint power resources. And we are also connected through offshore wind, where the EU is aiming for a 25-fold increase of production capacity from offshore wind within the next 30 years, with Germany set to hugely increase its investment in this sector. And as offshore wind is our largest renewable exports when it comes to goods and services, the Norwegian offshore wind industry can and will do its part in reaching this ambition. And furthermore, Norway is Europe's second largest supplier of natural gas, and a substantial share is consumed in Germany. About 40% of our gas exports are delivered to landing points in northern Germany. And as coal and nuclear power is phased out in several European countries, it is likely there will be a continued demand for natural gas. However, in the long run, natural gas needs to be decarbonized to sustain its role in the energy mix. Additionally, clean hydrogen produced from natural gas with carbon capture and storage is an energy carrier of great interest, not only for Germany and Norway, but also globally. And finally, what is perhaps most important, Norway and Germany are sharing the same ambitions in reaching climate neutrality. And having in mind the EU Green Deal, aiming for a sustainable EU economy and a climate neutral continent by 2050. So, what can Norway offer in this energy transition and into the important cooperation between our two countries? First, by being active on all relevant international arenas where climate solutions are discussed, supporting actions under the Paris Agreement, and taking part in the EU emissions trading system. Second, we will of course contribute as a renewable energy nation. With an emission-free power system, we are in a unique position compared with most other countries in electrifying industries and the transportation sector. And finally, we will continue to contribute as a petroleum nation. But as we are moving towards a low-emission society, the petroleum industry also has to do their parts. In other words, cutting emissions offshore is also inevitable. And we must also remember that the technology and competence in the oil and gas sector provides the foundation for new opportunities in other sectors. The expertise and experience of the industry is key to cutting emissions, developing new technologies, and creating new jobs, such as, for example, offshore wind. In the years ahead, we want the industry to keep up this momentum, cut costs, and explore global opportunities. And that is exactly what our policies aim for. We are opening areas for offshore wind projects, and we are supporting new technology through public schemes and facilitating research and technology developments. We are also looking at the possibility for using the expertise to extract seabed minerals, resources the world will demand in the green transition. On carbon capture and storage, we have made substantial progress by launching Longship, the Norwegian government's full-scale CCS project that was already mentioned here today. And the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, as well as the International Energy Agency, have made it clear that CCS is necessary to reach our common goals. The project demonstrates a full-scale value chain, including infrastructure for transport and storage of CO2, and lowering the costs for CCS. These are crucial steps to reducing risks and to make other countries utilize the CCS technology. And the aim, of course, is to capture CO2 from industrial sources, transport it to a terminal on the west coast here in Norway, and stored safely deep under the seabed in reservoirs on the Norwegian continental shelf. Longship is a milestone in the Norwegian government's combined industry and climate efforts. The project will, of course, reduce emissions from Norwegian industry, nurture technology development, but also create jobs. And finally, we all know the potential of hydrogen, an energy carrier with low emissions, and in addition, its potential for new activity and new jobs, especially within industry, transport, and the maritime sector. The Norwegian government, as was mentioned, will shortly on June 11th present a roadmap for hydrogen, which will systemize the further investment in hydrogen and support the entire value chain, from a domestic market to full-scale production, infrastructure, and export opportunities. The roadmap will be a part of the government white paper focusing on the long-term value creation from Norwegian energy resources. And the goal, of course, is to assess the industrial potential of the Norwegian energy resources for future sustainable and not least profitable jobs. Our energy prospects are ever growing, and they are also becoming increasingly interconnected. Our policies and the white paper will attempt to connect these dots in a time where building industries and jobs is at the very foundation of a low-emission future. So, ladies and gentlemen, the pandemic has brought about rapid changes in our society. We know this applies for the change in technology and energy use as well. It calls for preparedness and policies with both a long-term approach and a broad approach, and not least a joint approach. Energy has been and will likely be at the core of the excellent relationship between Germany and Norway. And as we look to the future, we must build on that platform, continue to identify those common interests in energy, reducing emissions, and developing technology, and collaborate for a sustainable energy future. So thank you so much for your attention, and I look forward to hearing the next speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Tina Bru, for your statement. Highly appreciate it. We are going to continue with our political statements and political keynotes. And next up is Olaf Lies, Minister for Environment, Energy, Construction and Climate Protection in Lower Saxony. Mr. Lies will highlight some of the points from the perspective of a German state with strong, actually very strong ties to Norway. Lower Saxony is the biggest trade partner among the German states, biggest trade partner to Norway among the German states, covering roughly 30% of the overall trade volume. So, Mr. Lies, stage is yours.
Thank you very much, dear Minister Bru, dear State Secretary Feicht, dear my friend Andreas. Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this dialogue. I think climate protection is our common goal, and the energy sector is the crucial requirement for that. And Norway is one of our important partners for solving the energy, also to save the energy system. So in Lower Saxony, directly in Emden, the Gasco company is our partner for a safe and a very important natural gas import. And I think that is, I'm sure, the discussion of this morning. Today it is natural gas, and we will discuss how it is possible to decarbonize natural gas, and so how it is possible to make natural gas as a partner for green gas, for green hydrogen. I think that's a very important discussion, and thanks that it is possible to discuss this in this morning. I'm pleased that Germany and Norway are working together on this goal. But Corona has determined everyday life. But climate change is a far greater challenge. Therefore, the federal government set its climate target just a few days ago significantly tightened. But it's also clear in Germany, we can only achieve our goals together. That means the federal government and the federal states together. It is a particular challenge for Lower Saxony as a coastal state. Its opportunity and obligation at the same time. The Federal Constitutional Court has made it clear how important climate protection is. Generational justice is required here. For this reason, we have included climate protection and adaptation to climate changes in the Constitution of Lower Saxony. The text says the country takes responsibility for future generation and protects the climate and mitigates the consequences of climate changes. Against this background, we will sharpen our goals. Climate goals in Lower Saxony were set in Climate Protection Act last year. First, total emissions in Lower Saxony reduction of at least 55% by 2030, climate neutrality by 2050. We will adjust this after the changes at the federal level. Second, state administration, minus 20% by 2030 and climate neutrality by 2045. Third, balancing the energy demand in Lower Saxony through renewable energies up to the year 2040, only 18.5 years. That means that we have to expand wind and solar energy more quickly. Fourth, we need to maintain and decrease natural carbon storage capacities. And fifth, we have an energy and climate protection program with 1 billion euros for climate protection ideas and solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, for the energy transition, we need faster expansion of renewable energies. Most of the greenhouse gas emissions in Lower Saxony are energy related. First and foremost, climate protection means changing the way we use energy, save energy, increasing energy efficiency, and ambitiously expand wind energy and photovoltaics. At the same time, it's necessary to store energy in large quantities. The arithmetic sharp of renewable energies and gross electricity consumption in Lower Saxony was 96% in 2020. Nationwide, it's 45%. But the energy transition will not work with electricity only. It's not at the moment. We can just look at electrons. We have to need molecules. As already know, we use natural gas. This shows the importance of hydrogen for the energy transition. That shows the importance of green or blue, or we discuss it in other European countries, red hydrogen for the energy transition. Starting into the production and use hydrogen on an industrial scale is an essential requirement for achieving our climate protection goals and thus for a climate neutral energy supply. On the one hand, hydrogen is used as an energy carrier. On the other hand, hydrogen is used as raw material in the steel and chemical industry as well as in refineries. It's using for decarbonizing the industry. Due to its location and infrastructure, Lower Saxony has the best opportunities to become a leading producer of environmentally friendly hydrogen technologies. And also as an important location for the import of green or maybe of blue hydrogen. I will say something about the colors later. Additional offshore wind capacities of 20 gigawatt by 2030 and a further expansion of offshore wind energy by 2040 will be mostly arrived at the Lower Saxony coast side. The goal is to reach 40 gigawatt by 2040. After that, however, further expansion is required. EU goals go beyond that, and that is the right way to go. Additional to that, we will increase onshore with energy through revision of the legal conditions and the regional land use and development plan. We also want to carefully develop the potential for wind energy in the forest. With a well-developed port infrastructure on the North Sea coast, Lower Saxony offers ideal conditions for further imports for green hydrogen or synthetic fuel based on renewable energies. The production and import of green hydrogen is one side, but we also have to be able to storage large volumes. The geological conditions for safe underground hydrogen storage in gas caverns and an extensive gas network infrastructure are ideal in Lower Saxony. We are ideally suited as a future hub for hydrogen and also for green hydrogen. We can supply the industrial regions of Lower Saxony and Germany with hydrogen. The existing gas networks become available are an ideal addition to a necessary expansion of the electricity network. There's a large number of initiatives in Lower Saxony. Many companies recognize the opportunities and potential for Lower Saxony as a location for their activities. Hydrogen and its derivatives have the best chance in applications for which we would otherwise probably not be able to achieve decarbonization. Air traffic, basic chemicals, steel production, and in sectors where the profitability gap is small, maybe example trucks. But one thing is clear, a new industry needs support. Building a hydrogen economy certainly requires significant investments. We have to build the infrastructure. In addition, we need to develop economies of scale and potential for cost savings on both the supply side and the demand side. It is therefore necessary to fill the remaining gap in the profitability of investments in hydrogen technologies with the help of suitable solutions. In some areas, we have binding quotas, like in green kerosene, which contributes to the promotion of hydrogen. The funding of investments in hydrogen projects being prepared by the federal government as part of the IPCEI hydrogen. This is an important first step in this direction. The federal states will also make a significant contribution to this fund. Lower Saxony also supports hydrogen projects. We are aware of the opportunities that this creates for economic growth and employment in Lower Saxony. The Ministry of Environment has initiated different funding guidelines. But we will only be successful together. Climate protection is also a European challenge, and it's also a European opportunity. Even in the future, Germany will not be able to secure its energy needs in its own country. The import of energy will play a crucial role. Norway can be a crucial strategic partner. Also in the future, Norway is today a very important strategic partner with the natural gas, and maybe in the future with blue or with also green hydrogen. But we have to answer an important question. We have a discussion about blue and green hydrogen in Germany. Our goal for the future is, of course, green hydrogen. But I'm not sure if it is possible in 2030. I'm sure it is not possible in 2040 or what will be after that. So we have to find solutions for hydrogen solutions today. And so I'm sure that the discussion about blue hydrogen is also very important for us, for Norway, and for the climate protection. But there will be also alternative solutions on that way. We cannot turn a blind eye to the fact that others in Europe see things differently. So we have also a discussion about red hydrogen. That is why we need a German Norwegian energy partnership. Then we can work through the necessary questions and we can give the answers together. I'm convinced together we will succeed in building a hydrogen economy. And I think we will discuss the colors of this hydrogen economy. If it is blue in the beginning, if it is green in the end, or if it is both blue and green. And so I'm planning to come to Norway with a delegation in autumn. And I hope we will further on this discussion from today in the end of the year. And maybe it's a good start for coming closer in the connection for hydrogen solutions. If it is green or if it is blue, I think important is that this be a part of climate protection in Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lies, for this interesting statement and also for this look into the future. And of course, you, but of course also Mr. Feicht, are heartily welcomed here in Norway with the delegation. Before we move to the political dialogue, I would ask my colleague Hannah Marit, who has an information
Yes, on the technical side.
On the technical side, yes.
We had some mix-up with the links in advance before starting the webinar. So if you are in a webinar now where you see a chat with a link to a new webinar, please join the link in the chat and not so that we can have the correct streaming for everyone. So then we can continue with the political dialogue.
Thank you, Anna-Marit. It's important to be at the right place at the right time. And the right time is here and the right place also. So it's an energy dialogue as we announced it, of course. So we appreciate a lot that our guest agreed to stay with us, to get also into a dialogue and for a couple of minutes. And we would start this dialogue with a question to all of you, but perhaps we start with Minister Tina Bru on the topic, which infrastructure for energy exchange should we aim for to achieve the climate goals?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? I think my connection fell out a little bit.
Yes, of course. I would start with a question to all of you, and the question would be, which infrastructure for energy exchange should we aim for to achieve the climate goals?
Well, I think, of course, electrification does play a key role in reaching the climate goals. So the interconnectors that we already share between Norway and Germany will be important in that future. And I think also looking at infrastructure to accommodate also the growth that we are going to see in renewables and low emission gases will be important. And I mean, this report came out yesterday, but I'm sure you've all been aware of the new report from the IEA that really did put some huge numbers in place on what kinds of investments are needed in infrastructure to accommodate the growth in renewables and to get that power out to where it's needed to decarbonize. So, I mean, using the existing infrastructure that we have most efficiently is important, but we are also, of course, going to have to build new infrastructure. And NordLink is very important in that sense, and I'm sure also looking at the possibilities within offshore wind and potential hybrid projects down the line will also be important in that respect. But mainly, I see great opportunity. I think it's exciting, and the possibility to also create new jobs and building this new infrastructure that we're going to need is very exciting.
Thank you very much, Minister Tina Bru. Perhaps some comments from Andreas Feicht and Olaf Lies on this infrastructure topic also. Mr. Feicht, please.
Well, it's totally clear that this huge ambition in order to reach our goals and targets and to manage the energy transition without expanding the infrastructure is not thinkable. So it's crucial. And this is on the electricity side, of course, like NordLink, but we also need other and more interconnectors to other European countries in our neighborhood, especially the Scandinavian partners. A lot of offshore wind projects will be hybrid incorporation projects in the North Sea, but also in the Baltic Sea. We signed just in December, we signed also a memorandum of understanding with our Danish partners. So we need more electricity infrastructure between the European countries, but also onshore in Germany itself. So we will strengthen our electricity grid. About 11,000 kilometers of power lines we want to construct until 2030 and want to invest 100 billion euros in this expansion. So really a huge program, and I'm with Tina Bru. It's a program also to create new jobs and economic welfare, of course. But we also see a lack of acceptance when we look at this huge infrastructure, not only constructing wind onshore. I heard is also the question and an issue in Norway, but also, of course, in Germany and when it comes to the infrastructure. We have big chances and opportunities in order to reshape the gas infrastructure and bring it to a hydrogen infrastructure. This is we should use this treasure we have, of course. So using an existing infrastructure is always better than building a new one. But it's more than pipelines. It's also the question of importing structures on ports and storages. Also, not only pure hydrogen, but green ammonia and so on. So the infrastructure issue is a crucial one, and it's the center of our policy.
Thank you, Mr. Feicht. Mr. Lies, from the perspective of Lower Saxony.
Yes, I think the electricity infrastructure is also important as the gas infrastructure. We have both. With NordLink, a very important electricity infrastructure, and with the gas infrastructure, I talked about Gasco and Emden and Lower Saxony is also very important. But what will be the next step? Now we have the import of natural gas. It will be important also in the future. We are also discussing the import of decarbonized gas, so like blue hydrogen or green hydrogen. And we have to discuss what is the way to transport it. Is it a pipeline? Is it transported by ship? Andreas Feicht told about the port infrastructure. Is it like ammonia, or is it methane, or is it something like that? So I think that is very interesting to discuss it with a directly connection between Norway and Germany. What might be the right way, but because it's not only the import infrastructure from green gas or blue hydrogen from Norway, it's also a discussion about an international exchange of energy. So I think that might be one of the very important questions for the future. What is the way to transport energy with electricity infrastructure, with gas infrastructure, and what might be the way for green gas infrastructure?
Already the topic international projects, international connections. I would also proceed with a second question also here, also addressed firstly to Minister Tina Bru. We are focusing, of course, here in this energy dialogue on bilateral relations. But, of course, there is also a word outside, for example, called European Union. So here would be the question, how will Norway align with the EU strategy, or what role will international cooperation projects play?
Well, Norway fully backs EU Green Deal. I think this is a very important cooperation in the EU and a very important roadmap showing the way to how we are to reduce emissions, but also create wealth and jobs along the way. So we will wholly support that development. And I think Norway's potential to help speed up this transition through what we can bring to the table, whether it's through our renewable power energy, through the interconnectors to the EU, or whether it's through what we're doing now on carbon capture and storage. And just in reference to the discussion we were just having on infrastructure, I mean, a main part of the Norwegian CCS project is about creating that infrastructure, showing how to transport, how to safely store, to have that possibility also for industry in other European countries looking to find a way to handle their emissions. And I think that's a big key to actually cracking the code on CCS, to make it something that's viable in a bigger scale, to demonstrate that this is possible and to bring the costs down on the infrastructure part of carbon capture and storage, because we've already done a lot of capture, but now we need to amp up the part that has to do with the transportation and storage. And of course, our cooperation in European projects like the German initiative on the IPCEI for hydrogen is also important. This also has to do with infrastructure. You're never going to be able to build up that market for hydrogen if the infrastructure is not in place. So I see many possible partnerships for our two countries, but also in the greater sense in the European Union relating to exactly this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tina Bru. Are there some comments from Mr. Lies and Mr. Feicht? Otherwise, we would also address to the audience where we got some questions. So, Anna-Marit.
Yes, we had a few questions from the audience, and I think we could maybe get a comment from you on the latest report from the International Energy Agency yesterday, where we will see a different role of oil and gas and the global acceleration race to renewables. Could we get a comment from you on that?
Are you asking me? Just
Sorry, Tina Bru, please start.
Thank you. Well, I haven't, of course, had the opportunity to read the whole report yet, as it was just published yesterday. But what it basically tells us is, of course, what we already know, which is that this transition will be very challenging, and it requires a lot, not least when you look at the growth that is needed in renewables. It's almost mind-blowing to look at these numbers, and it really does accelerate the need to take action. So that's one thing that I definitely take with me from the reports. And for Norway's part, I mean, when it comes to oil and gas, we, of course, we know that we will see a decline on the Norwegian continental shelf when it comes to oil and gas production in the years ahead. We just put out a white paper that showed that we are expecting a decline in oil production by 65% once we get to 2050. I mean, oil and gas is not a renewable resource, but in the gas perspective, using gas to produce clean hydrogen through carbon capture and storage is a possibility and something that's going to be needed. But all in all, I think what this report highlights more than anything is that the challenge is huge and we don't have a lot of time, and the time to take action is now.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Of course, very actual since the report has been published yesterday. So you mentioned the time. Time is running. Time is running also for us. There would have been a lot of other topics to discuss, like the H2 Global Initiative in Germany. But perhaps we take it in one of the later webinars when we concentrate on hydrogen. So once again, thank a lot, dear ministers, dear Mr. State Secretary, for taking your time and discussing with us and with our guest today. We appreciate it a lot, and we hope to continue this discussion in the next months, at latest at the next Energy Dialogue 2022. Thank you for being with us. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good wishes.
Thank you, and welcome to Norway at any time if you wish to come with a delegation.
Will do.
Thanks, we will forward it. We now move on to the next session, and we are happy to present the next speakers now from the industry after having the political panel. I start with Anja Isabel Dotzenrath, CEO at RWE Renewables. Ms. Dotzenrath is, as we heard already twice now, the next honorary consul of Norway, located in Essen. Also from my side, congratulations to that.
Thank you.
She's joined by Arvid Moss. Arvid Moss, he's Executive Vice President at Hydro Energy. Mr. Moss is also President of the Confederation of Norwegian Enterprise, or short NHO. And Mr. Remi Eriksen from DNV is still with us. Thank you for that. Let's start this panel discussion, and we would of course also ask our guests to participate in the chat. We have now heard some different but also partly some similar political statements. Ms. Dotzenrath, in the light of the recent court ruling in Germany and new climate neutrality target 2045, for example, what does this mean for RWE and the energy sector in general? Perhaps you could afterwards also get some short comments from Remi Eriksen and Arvid Moss. But Ms. Dotzenrath, stage is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Pleasure to be with you today. Thanks for the kind invitation and the nice welcoming words on my new honorary role. So your question is, what does this new court ruling actually means? It actually means that we will have much more ambitious targets for the power sector. Just to highlight it with some numbers, the carbon budget for 2030 for the power generation sector used to be 175 million tons, and it has been now reduced to 108 million tons. And if you look at what that means in terms of carbon reduction, it's a 77% reduction compared to 2019, and I think that is an enormous challenge. But rightly so, the power sector has to play a very crucial role, because we want to decarbonize, electrify, and decarbonize adjacent sectors. therefore we need to move ahead. And this is obviously a big challenge, not only for us as a company, but at the same time, it's a huge opportunity because we are one of the biggest renewable companies in the world. And obviously, what this new ambition level means, we need to absolutely accelerate the build out of renewables in Germany and in Europe and in obviously also the rest of the world. And if we look at what is required to get us there, I think starting with the things which are in the hopper, I mean, technology is there. I think there are funds available. There is willingness to invest in the sector. So there is an abundance of money, as I used to say it. But what we really desperately need, is even better policy. And two lenses, if you allow, our national lens, Germany. I think we still struggle with sometimes really cumbersome permitting processes, and this really holds us back. I think we could do much more, build out much more onshore, offshore, wind, solar, but permitting procedures are too long. And this is not only true for the renewables projects, but also when we think about grid infrastructure, ports, etc. I think we heard, let's say, similar comments today already. And then one of the topics which is very, very dear to me, and you have heard me saying this many, many times, I don't think that Germany is at the moment competitive in the, let's say, financing scheme when it comes to offshore wind. I have been very strongly advocating for two-sided contract for difference, which are the key instrument in UK. Poland has adopted it, France has adopted it, and this basically typically results in very, very low energy prices because of the very competitive nature, but at the same time, low financing costs for the investors. And this really drives down cost while ensuring that the projects are built. And I think that, for me, is the way forward in Germany. And a quick lens on the, let's say, European level, or Europe, not only EU, but European level. I think we need much more cooperation because offshore wind will be absolutely vital, I think, for decarbonization in Europe. 300 gigawatt offshore wind target has been mentioned, and we need to cooperate with Norway in particular. You have fantastic natural resources, offshore wind resources, and we need to ensure that you have a seat at the table, and we can discuss really how to build out an European offshore infrastructure with meshed grids, with interconnectors, with hybrid projects.
Thank you very much. So perhaps a comment also from Arvid Moss. Do you see similar challenges, Mr. Moss, regarding your recent strategic changes and the establishment of a new business unit on new clean energy at hydro energy?
Thank you. Well, I think I can. First, I share very much the perspective that's been in the earlier presentations, and it's not now any more debate about what we need to do. It's really a question: how fast can we do it? And that is also the reason why we in Hydro we are two focus areas. One is low carbon aluminium, and the second is to grow in new energy, meaning solar, wind, hydrogen, batteries, etc. And I think the focus is now really to accelerate the development. For us, it was critical to establish very focused business units that could work on these separate items, and then to work with partners that could really ensure that we get, let's say, the total cost down as fast as possible. Because this is really about doing the energy transition in a very cost-efficient way, and really try to de-risk what is possible to de-risk, and work with partners that is really through the whole value chain of this. But I agree that what was just said, that there are some hurdles that we have to work on. Permitting process, clearly an issue. Yes, Norway has fantastic wind resources, both onshore and offshore. But onshore, we have really been into a political turbulence over the last years. So it's very hard to build more onshore wind now short term in Norway. And offshore wind, of course, we have just opened up a few areas. And of course, how fast can we build the offshore wind is also a question about regulations and permitting processes and partnerships. But all in all, what is so fantastic now is that everyone has the eye on one thing: we have to deliver. And what I think is also great is that we see now all the large companies across different industries are really embarking on this task, and that's why I'm an optimist, and we will manage this faster than expected, and we will do it at lower cost than expected, because this is an exciting journey, and we will do it in a good way together.
Thank you, Mr. Moss. I think it's a very good sentence. We have to deliver, and I think we have to deliver together. It's also very important, since we talked also about the European strategy, for example. But Mr. Eriksen, you followed also the discussion. Did you have some comments on that, what we discussed? And especially also, you mentioned in your presentation also the hydrogen value chain. Part of the value chain is, of course, the infrastructure, which we talk about in several ways. But what is the key infrastructure challenge, according to your opinion?
Yeah, no, thank you. So the first on you can hear me, right? You can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I would say that first task for politicians is to constantly measure progress against ambitions. I think that's the first thing, because plans are not results. And I believe this is the best way of identifying and prioritizing gaps between the future we want and the future we are in fact making. So I think that is an important task for politicians. The second is that the public sector is a big buyer of services. So I think politicians should, use their force so that the public sector is buying low carbon solutions. So using the public sector's buying power to shift towards low carbon solutions. And the third one is to give some certainty for private investors to make sure that we move fast. So permitting was mentioned earlier. I think these are important, obstacles for moving fast. So to make it more transparent, and also to make it transparent from an investment point of view. When it comes to hydrogen, unfortunately, the infrastructure challenge involves the whole value chain. That's the challenge with hydrogen, both on production, transport, and storage, and also use. So I think the key point is that we need to think of this change as a transition and not a sudden shift. So we need to look for transition bridges where we use natural gas with blends of hydrogen. And we see a lot of projects around in the world on that, where existing gas infrastructure is blended with greener components, such as hydrogen, but also biofuel, so that you gradually are moving towards, and you can get sufficient volumes of hydrogen. And I think it's important that we are not trying to make perfect the enemy of good, and start using the technologies that we have at hand, and not wait, because the bucket of carbon is filling up every hour. So we need to start moving on solutions that are actually de facto reducing carbon footprints today.
I think this was a very good comment, which has also been mentioned by our guests from the ministries in Germany. Not to wait too long, but find some pragmatic solutions also in this transition period. But I would ask Hannah-Marit if we have got some questions also from the audience. I guess we do have so.
Yes, we have. Also here a question regarding the report we saw yesterday from the International Energy Agency. And it emphasized that no further oil and gas field should be opened by 2050, or from the moment now, or for after 2021. In your view, is this feasible? Maybe you could start, Mrs. Statsenrath.
Yes.
Sorry, I was on mute, as always. Even after more than 1 year, we're still not able to unmute us, but sorry for that. So is it possible? I think we need to make it possible. I mean, if we want to comply with the Paris Agreement and our targets, I think we need to find new ways to decarbonize the world. And I think we heard from Tina Bru today what she believes are the implications for Norway by 2050, minus 65% oil production. And I think this is a reality. And I think we need to put all our efforts in to ensure that basically we can move away from fossil fuels to a more sustainable energy system. And I'm also, Arvid, I'm also an optimist. I'm fully with you. I think now it's the time to deliver, and I think we've come a long way already. I think it's pretty. I mean, if we look at what happened in the last 12 months, the momentum around the world, it's simply mind-blowing for me. And all the big corporations join in, clear 2050 commitments. We can do it. I'm absolutely convinced. And now we need good pragmatic solutions to keep going. And let's not write 500 new PhD theses on it. Let's get going.
If I can just comment on that, I share this view. I think that 3 years ago we made a study in Hydro where we said it's possible to decarbonize the energy sector in Europe towards 2050 completely. This year we ran the study, is it possible to decarbonize the full economy in Europe until 2050? And it is possible. It's really possible. So I rather than discussing the report, I say my job and Hydro's job and many other companies' job now is not to debate that, it's really to work on renewable solutions and get things moving faster. And I think that the as you also mentioned, Remi, it's about the security for investments, but it's not it's not so much about, of course, sometimes you need some public support to get over the hurdles, but it's a lot also about de-risking. How can the state and let's say provide de-risking mechanisms so that you can, let's say, go in with your money in and ensure that you have a certainty for a certain period. So there are many measures here. I think that our job now is really to be forward-leaning and work on the solution space and not debating whether this is right or wrong in 2050 or 40 or 60. We have so much to do. It's not about new PhD theses. It's really about deliveries now.
Yeah, and I support that. It's not about plans. It's about action and creating results. And we might revise the ambitions as we go along. I think it's good to have a stretch. And I mean, we have a lot to stretch for. And as I said, the technologies are there to get us moving. And I think it's important to get us moving to see that the carbon trajectories are coming down. I think that's an important, and we will learn more as we go along. So I think this is key, and ambitions will change, but we should not have a competition on making the best ambitions. We should have the competition of making the best progress.
A good point.
Yeah.
And any more questions from the audience at the moment?
Not at the moment.
Okay, so we have been into the regulatory framework. We had our political guests. Also, to be frankly, what does the industry need from the politics to decarbonize, to reach that goal? Of course, we talked about the pragmatical solutions, better regulatory framework. Any other proposals, Ms. Dotzenrath? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if I look at the German Norwegian friendship and partnership, which is now going on for many decades, I would have a couple of very practical proposals. If you look at the German energy law, the EEG, that foresees already, let's say, cross-border auctions. But unfortunately, not with Norway, because Norway is not part of the European Union. And I think we need to change that. And the reasons are obvious. I mean, Norway offers fantastic natural resources. We talked about, let's say, the battery role of Norway. And we talked about the decarbonization of gas. So, I mean, if we think about fostering the bonds between the two countries and looking at the fantastic offshore potential Norway can offer, we need to ensure that these cross-border auctions between Germany and Norway can take place. This is, let's say, practical proposal number one. Practical proposal number two is really we need to strengthen these, and this has been mentioned, the hybrid project. So an offshore wind farm plus, let's say, an interconnector, because the energy needs to go somewhere. And Norway is already well equipped with fantastic a CO2-free energy system. It doesn't need the additional electricity, but Germany needs it, and we need it to produce green hydrogen. So if we need to really, let's say, work on this framework to build and also to tender offshore wind and interconnector projects together. And finally, green hydrogen. We also need to think about offshore wind and green hydrogen infrastructure pipelines in, let's say, in combination. It doesn't help if we only, let's say, tender out leases for offshore wind. We also need to think about how to transport the green hydrogen where the green hydrogen is needed. And obviously Germany will be a very big thing for green hydrogen. So 3 practical proposals from my side.
Thank you for that. Perhaps a comment from Remi, Eriksen, Arvid, cross-border auction could be a driver in this. Would it be possible?
Sorry, what was? I couldn't hear your question now.
I would concentrate on the first proposal by Ms. Dutzenrath to make possible cross-border auctions. Since Norway is not
for wind.
Yes.
Yeah, that could be a good opportunity to get momentum on that. And I think also when it comes to transport of hydrogen, which is, it's the hard to abate sectors that are the challenge. We're doing great on decarbonizing the power grid. There are good progress and there are incentives, but there are much more to do, but we have not done much on decarbonizing the hard to abate sectors. And that's where hydrogen comes in. Whether hydrogen will be transported over long distance or not, it's still a question mark. It might be in the form of natural gas and then carbon capturing and steam methane reforming on location. If it's blue hydrogen, if it's green hydrogen, it probably have to be produced at location or transported in form of ammonia. Because as you know, hydrogen is challenging from an energy density point of view and also from corrosion, and it's also a challenge when it comes to safety and explosion. So transport of hydrogen needs to be looked into. So what the end solution will be when it comes to blue and green hydrogen, I'm not sure. I think that's the jury is out, and a lot of work is being done on that. But to have cross-border auctions, I've not thought about it before. It might be a good idea.
Yes, thanks. Arvid Moss. What does the industry need from the politicians?
No, I think we have touched a lot of the points already through the discussion now. It's about visibility when it comes to regulations. It's about risk mitigation when it comes to investment decisions. It's about financial support to get over some hurdles. It's about infrastructure investments to get going, for example, on hydrogen. To mention a few, but I think that one fundamental challenge that we share together in Germany and Norway is really to get acceptance for that renewable power will have to be built, and it's going to be visible, and it will need transmission lines to be transported. Of course, that is where we had the challenge in Norway now, that there was a de-link between, let's say, investments in wind power and the value creation and the jobs. I think we need to be much better at explaining that if we want to decarbonize the economies, well, then there is no way around that we have to produce solar power or wind power or hydropower to do this change, And there I hear from Germany that you have the challenge as well with local acceptance. We have the challenge in Norway, both onshore and partly also offshore. I think this is a job that we as industry will have to do together with the political authorities, that we really do a good homework now to paint the broad picture. This is really what it takes. It's not only the one-trick pony. It's really about the total transition. And then we need to find ways to get acceptance for also let's say the production side of this. But But I think that both in Germany now, in the EU with the Green Deal, and in Norway with the white paper coming, there's a lot of good things coming on the table. I think we just have to go into dialogue with the governments and the authorities to find the right framework conditions going forward. Because we all want to work in the same direction. So it's more to really, as you did now, to really focus very specifically. This we want to change. This we want to change. Then I think we will have a good dialogue.
Thank you for that. So our time is unfortunately also running out. Perhaps a short final question. Is there, or what is your takeaway from today, from the discussion from we heard from the politicians and the discussion now on the bilateral basis? Who wants to start?
I can start, because this is my experience now for the last years, when I also have been had different roles. I think that what we see many times now is that industry is ahead of the politicians. I think that we see more opportunities. We really see technologies there. We want to just let's say progress and deliver, and we see that some of the proposals coming up is really either it's the old days or it's not really relevant for what we're doing. So I think that that's why I'm so ask every let's say participant from the industry now to really go into dialogue with the political authorities to ensure that the voice of the industry and the voice of the energy companies and the voice of the renewables, that they're really heard. Because I think we see the solution space, and we need to bring that over the table, so that what we get back is framework conditions that we can deliver on. So that is really what I really want us all to do now, is really to contribute to that the reality of what it takes is well understood on the other side of the table.
Thank you very much. Remi, Eriksen, your takeaway.
Yeah, and the takeaway is that the political term is typically 4 years, and the challenge we have in front of us is decades, and that's a major challenge. And the second one is that we need to accept that it will cost a bit more in the beginning. It will not be a free lunch. I mean, it will cost as a transition, but we are then moving into a system that will cost less, because you have less problems than in the future. So this is also where we see generational challenges now, that we are shifting costs between generations. We need to take some more costs now to invest, because otherwise the cost will be enormous 20, 30 years down the road. And I think this is the key challenge, and I think that is a political challenge.
Thank you. Last word, Mr. Otzenrath.
I mean, and almost nothing to add. I think very, very important is that we bring also, let's say, society and the people on the journey. Yeah, and nobody wants to see a turbine in his or her, let's say, backyard. I think that resonates with all of us. At the same time, this is a societal, let's say, challenge which we need to master. I mean, it's nothing less than a complete transformation of our energy system, and we need to accept that change comes with it, that we will, all of us have to change our behavior, have to accept, let's say, that potential infrastructure projects need to be realized. And I don't think we have done a good enough job yet to explain that, and to explain that this is not a free lunch. I mean, we are just reinventing our energy systems globally, and this will cost money. And we need to ensure that the money is well spent, best spent, and not on stupid projects which don't really create the bang for the buck and don't have the impact which need to happen. And I think we had this lively debate about where should the green hydrogen go. I mean, obviously it should go into the hard to abate sectors, yeah, because a lot of other sectors can be easily electrified. And I think this type of dialogue needs to happen, and we really need to ensure that we spend the money wisely.
Thank you very much, Mr. Otzenrath. Our takeaway, Hanna-Marit, means we have to explain more, because it's a very complex topic. So we will continue doing this. Thank you very much, Mr. Otzenrath, Remi, Eriksen, Arvid, for the discussion. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you to all our guests following this discussion. And of course, thanks to our partners, DNV, RWE Renewables, Hydro, Equinor, Statkraft, Acta Energy, Statnett, and Tennet, and our co-organizers, both embassies and Innovation Norway. To be continued already tomorrow, Hanne-Marit, when the next webinar will take place.
Exactly. This was the first webinar of the 5 webinars in the German Norwegian Energy Dialogue. Tomorrow we'll be back at 10 o'clock with a webinar on the bilateral business opportunities in the hydrogen value chain. You find the agenda for this and the other webinars at german-norwegian.energy. By that, it is time to say thank you once again for joining, and ha det bra, and auf Wiedersehen.
Und tschüss.
Bitte.
Goodbye.